sorry, go ahead.
No, there's just sometimes a drinker next to
All
me.
right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for making it out on this Friday morning. I know we're getting towards the beginning. Well, we're already in the middle of the holiday season, but I know there's a lot going on over the next couple of weeks for everybody. I know it's a busy season for me. I was out last night until 12:30, which for me is late. I know, it's crazy. But thanks for coming out. And so Tyler's going to be talking with us today. And has everyone met Tyler?
Oh.
So Tyler's actually joined us this first season, for the second season at the beginning. And this is what we were wanting to see. We're actually starting to get more momentum from the team just coming up and stepping up and presenting. So I wanted to thank Tyler for taking a risk, being willing to get vulnerable in front of everybody and present today. We're going to continue and kind of go through some of the recap of what we've done around creating a tribe and community, really focusing in on assertive leadership today, and really how do you put a lot of that into action. So that's what Tyler's going to speak to us today. And before Tyler comes up here, I just want to open up with a word of prayer, and then Tyler will get going. All right. Lord, thank you for bringing us together today. It really takes a lot to get up in the morning and come in and really focus on how do we make ourselves better? How do we become better men, leaders in our community? It's through your grace and it's through your support that makes all of this possible. So speak to us today, guide our hearts, guide the message, and then take the message as we leave today and make it something new. Make it something that challenges us and give us the strength in your name to change our lives and those around us. Amen. Tyler, thank you.
Yeah, so I want to try to piggyback a little bit on what we've been talking about. So I'll just kind of recap briefly what we've been talking about as far as the tribe and pick up where Justin left off on servant leadership and how that ties into kind of being an assertive leader. So we've all loved Joe's diagram. I think he made on going to recap this, but this idea of the tribe that both from Sebastian Junger and competence, authenticity, and connectedness. And a lot of what I'll probably connect on a lot is the authenticity and connectedness and what that means in being assertive and as being part of the tribe. And so Justin talked last week about being a servant leader. So I'm going to put this a little bit. And kind of part of that is that key idea. The difference between a leader and a servant leader is the servant makes sure others people's highest priority needs are being served. And what I'm going to talk about is a little bit of the balance with this is that I think there's a focus on the other, but there's still going to be acknowledgement of what we need and where that comes into play. So diving right in, so one of the big things we're going to talk about is this idea of passive, assertive, aggressive. Okay. And so on either side of the scale, on the far side, it's being very passive, very aggressive. This whole thing is a spectrum. So it's not about being on the tips. I'm going to talk about some qualities and things that are going to be more on the extremes. What we want to think about is oftentimes we sit on one of those sides predominantly. And there may be something that tends to trigger us to go on one side or the other. What does that look like? And what is that? And so the other part is in this middle. So being assertive is not a single line. There's kind of a spectrum within being assertive. And so you can be kind of on the passive assertive or aggressive assertive side and still being assertive, still communicating what we want or need, but doing so more aggressively or more passively. So another diagram that shows this is this one, but so what are some of the kind of feelings or behaviors that we see about somebody who's passive, assertive, or aggressive? So on the passive side, if we're being passive, we tend to deny our own emotions, avoid confrontation, which is almost the trademark of passive, and focus on others. This tends to come across as nice. If you know somebody who you never get in conflict with, and they always focus on you, seems great. The problem is when we're passive and we're denying ourselves, we're denying what we want, our needs, our things, that oftentimes builds resentment, latent hostility, powerless, guilt, shame, ultimately frustration. On the other side, you can guess, most of them are opposites. So on aggressive, they're very confrontational, controlling, focused on themselves. Again, you can guess why they may come across as mean if you focus all on me, and want to control everybody else, think you're right, then yeah, come across as mean. This is also where we tend to explode, get very angry. And a lot of that comes from this idea that we're right, everybody else is wrong. So what does assertive look like? Maybe? There we go. So one of the key things is if we talk about passive is focusing solely on others and denying ourselves, and aggressive is focusing on ourselves and forgetting about everybody else, assertive is really recognizing each other as equals. This idea that I matter, but so do you. You matter, and so do I. It's not an either or. And the part of being assertive is being direct and clear. And we've talked a lot in this group. I wasn't here in the first semester, but I know we talked more then, and we've brought it up time and time again. It's about vulnerability, being vulnerable about our thoughts, feelings, and ideas. See, if you're over here on passive, it's real easy to avoid vulnerability. It's all about you. I don't have to share anything about me. If it's aggressive, we end up with a different type of armor against vulnerability. By the way, that's a talk for another day, is the armors of vulnerability. But you know, we just talk about anything else, and we can control the conversation and avoid vulnerability that way. So being assertive really requires us to be honest, to be authentic, and be vulnerable. So, in case the feelings don't work, what are some of the statements we see made with these? So, passive, it's not a big deal, I'll get over it, I don't like confrontation, I'm fine. I'll be honest, I forget who it was who said the acronym for fine. Was that you, Joe? Oh, back? Anyways. Okay, was that Jay? Yeah. So that tends to hold quite well with both the passive, and we'll talk about it again with passive aggressive. But, you know, effed up, insecure, narcissistic, and emotional.
Nice memory.
I would argue that emotional in this context, you know, a lot of what I'm going to talk about is that we do want to recognize our emotions, but when we're talking about emotional, I think when in that acronym is we're not controlling them, we're not putting them in balance, we're not even recognizing them, they're just kind of flooding out or being ignored. So on the aggressive side, you'll notice that all these statements are about the other person, and while I said they're self-centered, right, they also think they're always right. And so it's all about putting the other person down because that makes me look right? They don't understand me. They don't learn. You don't get it. You're not listening. Yeah, it sounds like it's all about the other person. It's all about the negative of the other person because you don't understand me. It's no effort to understand you. So assertive, and we're going to talk more about the second one of these, but one of them is what I hear you saying is. Right? When we're being assertive and we're having conversation, rather than I'm just going to take whatever you're saying and okay, and rather than telling you everything that you need to know, it's about trying to understand each other. So what I hear you saying is A, B, C, D. This is what my understanding of. We're trying to validate, we're trying to understand each other. The story I'm telling myself, we'll dive into more, is a tool from Brene Brown, where it's a way of expressing ourselves, expressing our wants and needs, while also understanding that story may not be accurate. So another part of this that, you know, so honestly where I started working on all this is in counseling. I think that, side note, but I think mental health is too bad of a stigma and I don't care. So, but so this is where we first went over this. And, you know, him and I were talking about this. Maybe, okay. And we came up with another set that kind of worked along the same scale. It's if we're being aggressive, we're being selfish. Hopefully by now that part makes sense, right? We're all about ourselves. But I think this is something we talk in Christianity a lot about. Let's be selfless. Well, I would argue that being selfless is actually being passive. We focus all on the others without actually acknowledging ourselves, and we tend to put ourselves down or devalue ourselves. So what is actually, what's in the middle there is we felt it's self-sacrifice. this is, to me, a key point to tie into the servant leadership. We talked about it isn't just helping, it is an unconditional service, as Justin said last week. And that's what we mean with self-sacrifice. This is a choice. This is not this thing I have to do. This is actually a language I try to get out of my own texts and conversations is, I don't have to do a lot of things. There's very few things I have to do. But I choose to help someone else. Later on tonight, I'm going to a friend's birthday party, and then we're actually going to leave the party to go serve a friend who's having all sorts of issues, and their dog's having issues, so we're going to watch the dog while they can get out and do something. I texted my friend with the birthday party to let him know in advance and told him I'm choosing to do this. I actually started my text and said I have to do this. I have to do this is a very selfless thing, and we're saying, hey, I'm focusing on others. I'm not really acknowledging that I have a choice in this. And what my counselor and I talked about, this is really Christ, right? Not your will, but my will, or not my will, but your will be done. But I also am going to choose to take that cup. I'm going to choose to take on that punishment. You know, Christ modeled this. You know, he didn't have to wash the disciples' feet. He chose to wash the disciples' feet. These weren't selfless acts, they're actually self-sacrificing acts. And I think this is important because in Christianity, we obviously disagree with being selfish, but I think we've kind of created a culture around passivity of saying, let me sit back and not say anything. And I think in you know, talking to a group of men, I think the other part of this that's important is that there's, to me, an ironic sense in here, but anger, a lot of the emotions that come with being aggressive, tends to be okay in masculine culture. It's okay for guys to get angry. Women get angry, we call them certain other names. But if guys get angry, it's totally okay. But yet at the same time, if we look at media, we look at our culture, we look at things in recent time, men are portrayed as passive. A lot of times we're becoming more and more passive, I would argue. And that's why on both sides, for men, we really need to be better leaders in the home, in our work, in our community. You know, we really need to become more assertive and in this realm of self-sacrifice that we're choosing to. Some of you know about my dad, and we can talk about that later, but one of the sayings that he had when it came to serving was, if you're going to help someone, do it because you want to, not because you have to, and not because you're expecting something in return. Right? If you're expecting something in return, that kind of falls in a passive-aggressive, I'll help you, but. And if you're doing it because you think you have to, it's passive. If you're doing it because you want to, it's self-sacrifice. Sorry, I know I'm beating this one a little bit to death, but I think this is part of the key to this whole idea of being assertive and assertive leadership. So, what happens under stress? So, two things tend to happen. Like I said, if you're passive and you build up this latent hostility, this latent resentment, one thing that happens is you explode. This was my dad, and this was the model I followed. Yeah, I'll do whatever. Oh, you want to go to the movie? Sure. Oh, you no longer want to go to the movie? Sure. Oh, you want to have that for dinner? Sure. Till I finally went, you don't care about anything I want. Why don't you ask me what I want? Well, I did 75 times. You kept saying it was fine. Oh, yeah, I guess that's true. So I had to accept that I wasn't being assertive, and I would tend to explode. The other side of this is passive-aggressive, and I've alluded to it, and JD gave me a great example of this, but...
Happy to help. Is that a personal example?
No, but so, you know, passive-aggressive is when, you know, again, when my boss and I call leak, we end up not overtly being aggressive, but we make comments on the side. So some of this is, you know, we have that resentment, we're sarcastic. So the example I'll use for JD, but it was in good humor, but, you know, Nick was trying to help me get set up, and, you know, JD goes and pulls out his phone and does it fast to Nick and says, hey, thanks, Nick, for getting that set up for me. Now, sarcasm, but the reality is, it is a form of passive-aggressive. And I mean, obviously they both know that's in good fun, but when we do that, it is worth reflecting, what are we saying, what are we communicating to this other person when we say these kind of indirect, unclear, undermining statements. It's intentionally not a true, accurate statement. We're trying to kind of poke. So...
Yeah, JD, come on. It was a lot funnier when I did it.
But yeah, JD just set me up. He didn't even know I was talking about this. But no, but so some of these things are fine, whatever, right? They love these phrases. In my opinion, we see them a lot in our teenagers. Let's be real, we all use them, but we'll blame them on the youth. I'm the youngest one here, I think, so it's fun to blame it on the youth. But it's really a statement of saying I'm not okay with this, but it's actually a state. The words are I'm okay with this, while simultaneously, yeah, whatever. Right? Simultaneously, I don't actually agree with what's going on. It's indirect, it's unclear. Thanks in advance. This is one we use at work. Hey, can you give me that report by the end of the day? Thanks in advance. Well, you're trying to be controlling and manipulative in a passive-aggressive, indirect, unclear, undermining way. So I'm not going to go through all these, but again, the one thing I will point out is that sarcasm's great. I'm not trying to say we can't joke around, but it is important to reflect on when are we actually being joking with the other person and when are we intentionally trying to make some stabs. And then saying, oh, well, I was only joking, can't you take a joke? What are we really doing there? So, just to kind of recap on the assertive side, that we really want to recognize each other as equals, be direct, and be vulnerable about what we're feeling, what we're thinking. And that this idea of being vulnerable is really tied to that idea of authenticity. That if we're going to be authentic about ourselves, we have to be vulnerable and be communicating what we're thinking, what our feelings are. At the same time, to have connection, we have to be vulnerable and recognize each other as equals. If you've ever had a conversation where someone else, talked all about themselves the whole time, how connected did you feel? How authentic did that connection feel? If, on the flip side, if you've ever had someone, my wife's actually very good at doing this, and she thinks it's a great quality at times, where all they do is ask you questions. And they really seem to get to know you, but you realize at the end you don't know a single thing about them. How does that make you feel as far as an authentic connection? Do you really have a connection with them, or did you end up just talking and don't really know anything about them? So it's this idea of recognizing each other as equals, that it's not one or the other that really creates this authentic connection that really requires to create that tribe. So the last bit is how do we actually live out? What does assertive really mean? And so there's a few mindsets, and I'll talk about some tools, and then we get to our questions here. So in the mindsets, for someone who's passive, this is important to understand. If you sit in passive most of the time, you have value. Your opinions matter, so share them. I think everybody who created this group would agree with me that we want everyone in this group to feel comfortable to share your opinions. If you sit in passive, we want you to know you have value, your opinions matter. Please share them. On the other side, if you tend to sit on the aggressive, you probably need to recognize that other people have value, their opinions matter, so listen to them. Again, this is on both sides of the spectrum. So be honest, be direct, be clear. This quote, I know when in the first semester, they mentioned that we talked about Brene Brown. I brought her up a few times in table talks. One of her quotes I really like is, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. Again, you'll notice this with the passive aggressive. If we're not being honest, we're not being clear about what we want, what we need, that is not being kind to the other person. By the way, I've been teaching this in my work context. If you're giving directions to an employee and you're not being clear about what they need, that's not kind. That's not letting them figure it out. That's not kind. That's not being clear about what's going on. So the other one is this idea of curious, not furious. This is a phrase that my CEO, my boss, came up with, or had. I don't know where she found it, but I do find it valuable with this, is that if we're going to be assertive, we have to avoid jumping to conclusions, and most importantly, we need to assume the best in other members of the team. Now, I purposely left this as team. This was the language I used in the work construct, but because whether we're talking about our table talk, this whole group, our home, our work, wherever it is a form of a team. I have a whole other slide deck on team development that applies, because it really is, they're really about relationships. A core principle I believe in is that while there's differences, predominantly your marriage, your friendships, your work relationships, your relationships here, they're all relationships. They're human psychological things that transpire through all of them. And if we assume the best in the other person, whoever, whatever the context is, then when we get upset, and we can try to be curious rather than furious, rather than getting mad at them, why? What's going on here? Why did you do this? So some tools with this, and I told you I'd come back to the story I'm telling myself. So this comes from Brene Brown. These quotes are from her, an interview with the Business Insider, when she released her book, Rising Strong. If you haven't read her books, I'm going to make the shameless plug because I think I've either read or listened to all of her books. She has a Netflix talk thing out now, and her TED Talk was the original. But a lot of great material in there. This is only covering the surface of it. But with the story I'm telling myself, basically, you're telling the other person, you're reading the situation, your interpretation, what do I think is going on? The story I'm telling myself is that you're upset at me. That's what I think is going on. But the other side is, I admit it's a story that I'm coming up with. So please push back on me. What's going on? The other way she says this, I think is very powerful, is I want you to see me, understand me, and hear me. Hear this, that assertive side of I have value, so I want to express my thoughts, my feelings, my vulnerability. I want you to see me, hear me, and understand me, but knowing that what you really need is more important to me than being right or self-protecting. So this is that other side of the story. I'm going to express myself, but understanding you is just as important to me. So my example here comes from work. This is the first time I ever used storytelling at work. And so my CEO calls me. I was actually traveling, and actually late in the day, if I recall, tells me that there's this big issue with this client. Now, I knew that there was an issue with the client. I've been working day to day with the client. Suddenly my CEO is calling me. Well, it's because their president called her directly to complain about the issue. Okay, geez. Well, a couple weeks later, we have a conference, and my CEO and CTO at the time, who was my boss at the time, met with the client. I was at the conference with them when this meeting happened, and they didn't invite me. Okay, well then a week after the conference, I get told that we're going to start doing monthly check-ins with this client. Hopefully I painted the picture. You might figure out the story that I started telling myself, but that I really screwed up. That my boss doesn't trust me, my CEO doesn't trust me. And then now they have to intervene. They've got to save the relationship. Actually, that was a phrase that my CTO said to me after that meeting was, "Don't worry, I saved it," which implied that something was so broken it needed to be saved. Well, crap. So I ended up doing this, and I shared this with my boss. So, okay, let's do a reality check. Let me actually share this story with her and see what's true. Came out. No, actually, I don't know where the CTO came up with that she saved it. When we talked to them, they said they loved you and loved Matt, who was working with you, and yeah, there's some bumps in the road. We need to get that figured out, but yeah, things are actually going pretty well overall. Oh, okay, that was much different than the way I figured this. And then, she actually wanted to do monthly check-ins with all of our clients, and this was just a reminder that she should start doing it. So you can see where we start to come up. The human mind is wired for getting the gray out. And so we're going to tell ourselves these stories. We're going to get that gray out. But oftentimes we're going to go in that furious, we're going to go in a different direction, we're going to go in the negative. And so checking this with the person and actually sharing this is vulnerable, but it also gives us this chance and it builds that relationship and that authentic connection to actually express ourselves, but also to give them that opportunity to tell us the truth. Because if I sat with this, I tell you that would have built resentment with my CEO, resentment with my CTO, resentment with the client. Why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you talk to me? And instead it was, oh yeah, that was an oversight. We should have invited you. I didn't even think about it. We had it scheduled long before I really even thought about that. So this is why the story I'm telling myself is a very powerful and good tool. The other part of this is the stormy first draft. I said we should be curious, not furious. The reality is we're not. That's just not the way we're wired. We will start off pissed off, angry. Like I said, these are emotions that are perfectly happy for men. And we get pissed off and angry a lot. And so what we do is that first story we create is what we call our stormy first draft. This comes out of that expression was furious. But one of the things that's important to acknowledge of these things is that's healthy, that's normal, that's okay. So we don't want to avoid it. Again, if we start stuffing it down, denying our emotions, we're being passive. We want to acknowledge it. You might want to write it down. Probably all heard the whole adage, let's write the email, but do not put it in a 2 and do not send it, right? Like, whether this is with your spouse, at work, wherever, again, in every context, this will come up, but write it out, and then probably not send it. But this is actually a joke. My boss, I got her to use the story on time myself, and now she's sharing her stormy first draft with everyone. So, there's steps here. But it's, in all seriousness, it's trying to get that idea of capturing that. And so when that comes up, again, if we want to move to the curious. So if we are acknowledging the best in the other person, and we're realizing that this isn't congruent, this doesn't match. So let's start asking ourselves questions. First off, why? Why isn't it congruent? What's going on? And what other stories might be true? So we come up with my wife's going against me, she doesn't care about me, if she respected me, she would have known, whatever. Well, did I communicate that want or desire before that she disrespected? Was I assertive? Or was she just communicating her wants and I was passive? I'll tell you, last week with my wife, I got very upset. We said we were going to go to the movie, we're going to go to this movie, we're going to do all that, okay. And then she wasn't feeling well and said, I don't want to go. I just, okay. And I got pissed off a couple hours later and exploded on her on a bunch of things and came off on 15 different topics, because by the way, that's what you do when you explode. You do not actually talk about the thing that pissed you off to start. You talk about everything off but. And realized that, after when talking to my counselor about the explosion, I said, well, yeah, I guess I wasn't assertive about the fact that I did want to go to the movie and I did have some choice. At the very least, even if you don't change the decision, by communicating it, you make yourself feel better that, okay, I actually did say what was on my heart. And again, was vulnerable.
I'll go see Frozen 2 with you, man.
So just to recap, is this idea of passive, assertive, aggressive. We want to be curious, not furious, being clear. And some of the tools where what I hear you saying is the story I'm telling myself, and remembering that stormy first draft, don't send it, but be okay with it, write it down, and process through it. So, the 3 questions I've got, okay, so I got an angle that didn't look legible. So where do you normally sit on the scale? Like I said, we tend to have kind of our status quo where we will sit on either passive aggressive, or maybe it is always assertive, but where do you normally sit? And by the way, this is not a judgment or shame thing in any of these. It's just a self-awareness check of where are we. And then does anything trigger you to be more passive or more aggressive? So one thing I didn't mention is there's listen to a psychological podcast. Yeah, I'm that guy. So my wife and I go on vacation. We were in Hawaii, and while driving around the island of Hawaii, we were listening to psychological podcasts because that's what we do. But so one of them was about what they called the turtle mentality. So when we're passive, we tend to recluse in our shell. Some of us, when I mentioned exploding and passive aggressive, there is another one, which is go more extreme on either of your natural signs. I'm normally passive, I go even more in my shell. I'm naturally aggressive, I become a hailstorm, and I just rain down. What is there things that trigger you? For me, I just went back home. My mom, she is a passive aggressive / aggressive individual, and I tend to become very passive. Even if I can be assertive at work, in my marriage, my friendships, whatever, when I get home, I become a turtle, and I just recluse. What triggers you? And then, what's the story that you've told yourself about a situation? Think about some time that you've been upset recently or whatever. What did you form? What was the story you came up with? If you did get to check that against the person, what was the reality? If you didn't, what are other stories that you might be able to come up with, for that situation? So,
Good job, John.
All right, so we have about 20 minutes to talk. Why don't we combine these 2 tables and get a good collection of opinions there, and then we'll recap it in about 15-20 minutes. Thanks again, Tyler.